What's going on, guys? It's Greg here. Just wanted to do a video today about what would you do if you ran out of supplies. Have you ever thought of that? Now, everybody seems to think that, if you're a prepper, that you're going to be able to stockpile enough food and water and supplies, medical supplies, whatever, building materials, ammunition, parts. A lot of people think they're just going to be able to stockpile that, and as long as they have, a couple months supply, then they should be good, right? But, what would you do if, what would happen if you ran out of supplies for some reason, or if the area where your supplies are kept is compromised, because of natural disaster or, man-made disaster, and you have to flee from the area where your supplies are kept. If, let's say, you store your supplies at your house, and you're in imminent danger and you have to evacuate your house. Obviously there's only so many supplies that you can take, unless you have a big vehicle where you can pack everything in. But I think that it's important to think about, what type of protocols do you have to deal with a situation where you need to gather supplies or find supplies, whatever they are. You may need to find some specific things. You may find yourself, let's say you're in a situation where the power is out for a few weeks, and you may have to find a part for your generator. Let's say your generator breaks down and you have to find a specific part, or your car breaks down and you have to find a specific part for your car. You should think about things like that, and you should think about what would you do if you ran out of your supplies, if your stockpiles ran out, if you ran out of water, if you ran out of food, or if your water became contaminated, or what happens if the food that you stored went bad for whatever reason. Sometimes that can happen, even though those foods have expiration dates on them, but you never know. They can go bad, if they get wet, or they're not stored properly, or they get exposed to too much heat or cold. So let's say, for example, you're in a grid down situation and the power's been out for a few weeks now, and you're starting to run low on food, and you don't have a water supply that you can, let's say you don't have a well, let's say you don't have a well or some type of running water that you can collect. If you're in an urban area, then you're probably going to be, let's say you have stored, water, you stored water in drums. Where are you going to get your water from? What are you going to do to replenish your water supply? What are you going to do to replenish your food? Where are you going to go to find food? Are you familiar with local game trails and local parks that you can possibly hunt, trap, and fish, some game and some fish? Do you have a vegetable garden? Are you familiar with wild edibles? Do you know what type of things you can eat in the wild or in wooded areas? Do you know how to gather different types of wild edibles? Do you have backup plans? If your food runs out, or your supplies run out, do you have a secondary or tertiary location where you have other supplies stored, where you have stockpiles of food, water, ammunition, parts, building materials, and medical supplies, things like that, disposable resources, because at some point, you're going to run out. If we're talking about a really bad situation, you're going to run out of supplies. So, you got to think about, where can I collect food? Where can I scavenge food? Where can I hunt? Where can I fish? You should become very familiar with game trails in your area, with areas where game animals inhabit. So if, God forbid, you have to hunt to, provide meat for your family, you can do that. If you're familiar with the local game trails where the animals are frequenting, if you know a little bit about animal habits, then you're gonna know, what areas they prefer. So now's a good time to educate yourself on learn a little bit about your local wildlife populations, any nearby game trails that you can set traps on, or possibly ambush an animal with a firearm or a bow, or an improvised weapon, so you should think about that. And then other things too would be, obviously, if it's a long-term power outage, the government's probably going to have like food that they give out and stuff like that. But, you have to consider, the government also has limited resources. They're not going to be able to, feed, 300 million people. I think that's what the population is now here in this country. I think it's like 300 million. I'm not sure. Something around there. So, 300 million people, that's a lot of people to feed. The federal government's not going to be able to, feed everybody for, a long period of time. They're going to be handing out maybe MREs, but how long are those MREs going to last, before they run out? And then you got to figure, if you're dealing with a grid down situation, there's going to be a lot of people fighting at these places. There's going to be long lines. People are going to be, fighting for these MREs. There's going to be violence. Potentially you may get ambushed. People may want to steal let's say you go to an area where there's, a FEMA place where they're handing out food. You may get ambushed. If there's people know that you have food and you just picked up food from the National Guard or the FEMA, and you're taking it back to your home or your dwelling, there may be a chance that you may get ambushed by, gangs, or, anybody could try to take your supplies. It may not even be gangs. It could be another family that's starving or hungry, or it could just be gangs. I don't know. I'm just saying. So you got to think about, the risk versus the reward. It may be very risky to try to go out, and venture out into public and then try to, gather food at these, government areas where they're going to be handing out food, whether it's FEMA or, the National Guard. They're going to set up probably like areas where they hand out food, or they probably going to deliver food to like certain grocery stores, and they're going to maintain a security there. So, it's going to be risky to venture out to those places because, everybody's going to be, this is going to be a battleground. Everybody's going to be fighting to get there. There's going to be, gangs and stuff, and bad people are going to be, waiting to ambush people. So you got to think about, is it worth the risk? Is it better for me to just try to, trap some game and maybe, venture out at night somehow and gather my food at night, So that's something to think about. What would you do if your supplies ran out, your food, your water, and any other kind of miscellaneous supplies, whether it's medical supplies, parts for vehicles, mechanical parts, tools, these types of things we take for granted now because we gotta, we can just go out to Home Depot if we need a shovel, or we need a specific type of socket, or, some type of Allen wrench or whatever it is. We could just run out to the store and get it. But, if it's SHTF situation and the power's been out for a while, let's say you got to perform maintenance on your generator or your vehicle or your firearm, and, you need a specific type of part and you don't have it. How are you going to acquire that? What are you going to do? You got to think about that. So, I'm not saying that you should be paranoid and start stockpiling, years and years worth of food. I'm just saying, for all you guys out there that have like several months worth of food stored away and different supplies, building materials, what's your plan? What's your backup plan? If for whatever reason your supplies run out or they become compromised, how are you going to acquire food and water? How are you going to acquire resources that you need, very valuable resources, very, it's something just to think about, and like I said, it's good to become familiar with your local wildlife populations. You should know, where the game trails are, nearby, around your house. You should observe the animal populations in the area so you know where the animals are frequenting. Generally speaking, animals, they're just like people. They need food and water to live, and then shelter, food, water, and shelter. So, animals are going to generally go in areas where they're protected from extreme temperatures, and also where they're protected from predators, and then they're also going to go to areas that have a lot of, food. Water's not that important if you live in the East Coast. There's water everywhere, so animals are generally going to be able to lick the dew off the ground, or even just from the vegetation that they eat. If we're talking about plant eating animals, they're going to get moisture from the vegetation, or just licking the dew on the grass in the morning. So in the eastern part of the United States, water's not that big of a critical thing for animals. They're generally speaking, they can get water anywhere, even if there's like a puddle on the side of the road, so the biggest thing that you want to look for is food sources, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about, food sources for animals. You gotta, that's a whole, thing, that's a lifetime worth of learning. You can learn, about how to hunt animals, and hunting. That's a totally separate thing, but, you should learn about the food source. The basic food sources are like nut-bearing trees in the fall. In the winter time, the animals are going to go after, especially like deer and rabbits and things like that. They're going to go after evergreens, or they're going to try to dig through the snow and try to find some leftover nuts on the ground. In the summertime, deer and most animals, especially herbivores, they're going to spend most of their time in grassy areas, very green areas with a lot of brush, because they're going to eat all that grass and all the brush, all those bushes and young plants and young trees, especially like small trees, like shorter than a few feet. The leaves on those trees are very, very succulent and soft. They're easy to digest, so the deer are gonna go after that. Especially like, tall grass, things like that. Sunny areas where there's a lot of young vegetation is where the deer are gonna be in the summertime usually. And then, shelter. In the winter time, the deer and animals are going to be looking to shelter from the winter elements, from the cold. Just like people, we go inside in our house and we turn the heat on. Animals, they usually have caves, or they have dens underground, or they build some type of den. If it's like a deer, something like that, they usually don't hibernate, so they have to find areas where they're protected from the elements, and that usually means south-facing slopes. They're not going to be in north-facing slopes for the most part. They're going to be on south-facing slopes because the snow depth is going to be lower there. It's going to be warmer, and they're also going to seek shelter from storms. If there's like a storm, they're going to go into like a densely wooded area to get shelter from the wind and stuff like that. So that's just some quick things to think about. If you need to hunt or trap, you kind of have to know the habits of your prey, of the game in your area. So, that's something to think about. Obviously that's a worst case scenario, that if you're in a starvation mode, then you're going to have to start thinking about that. But that's basically it. Just think about what you would do if you ran out of supplies. Where would you go to get more? Think about that. So just give that some thought. And then obviously there's also man-made places where you can scavenge resources. You may be able to find, if there's abandoned homes where families moved out or they evacuated, and nobody's going to be returning. If you're in like a disaster area and everybody evacuated, you may be able to scavenge resources from abandoned homes or abandoned buildings. You know, I'm not, you know, this is obviously a worst case scenario. You know, if you did that during a normal rule of law, then, you know, you would obviously be facing, you know, trespassing, burglary charges, you know. But if we're talking about, you know, a worst case scenario where, you know, your family's in danger or you're in danger and you need to seek shelter or gather resources, that's definitely something to consider. You know, so these are just hypothetical scenarios, and that's something to think about, you know. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm gonna have some more videos coming up soon. I have a couple videos I'm gonna make, but I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. God bless.